I love that we have access to this powerful language. No other discipline has the language that faith has. And so we need to use it to the benefit of those in society who have not been able to live fully in whatever way that means.
Hi, I'm Danielle DeLeo Kim, Executive Director of Philadelphia 250. In 2026, the country will commemorate the 250th anniversary of American independence. So I invite you to listen in and get inspired to take action as Philadelphia 250 brings together thought leaders and changemakers to share what those founding promises mean to them now and in the pursuit to 2026.
Hi, I'm Lorraine Ballard Morrill, Director of News and Community Affairs for iHeartMedia Philadelphia, and I'm excited for this conversation today about shared prosperity with Rabbi Jill Maderer, Senior Rabbi Rodef Shalom, and Reverend Naomi Washington-Leapheart, City of Philadelphia Director for Faith-Based and Interfaith Affairs. During this episode, in Philadelphia 250's In the Pursuit series, we'll explore the role of faith in our communities and in building shared prosperity for all. We'll share challenges and successes and talk about opportunities to work together. I'd like to thank you both for joining us here today, and I'd like to allow you to introduce yourselves as well. We'll begin with you, Rabbi Maderer.
Hi, I'm Rabbi Jill Maderer. I'm the Senior Rabbi of Congregation Rodef Shalom, which is a large Reform congregation, Reform Jewish congregation in Philadelphia, where I've served for about 20 years.
Hi, I'm Reverend Naomi Washington-Leapheart. I serve as the Director for Faith-Based and Interfaith Affairs in the Mayor's Office for the City of Philadelphia. I also teach part-time as an adjunct professor of theology and religious studies at Villanova University.
Well, let's get to know you a little bit better. I'm going to start with you, Rabbi Maderer. You became Rodef Shalom's senior rabbi in 2017, the first woman to do so. I wonder if you can share with us a little bit about what drove you to decide to follow this path that allowed you to become the first woman at Rodef Shalom.
For me, the rabbinate and the work in the Jewish community has been an organic development. I grew up in a family that was really involved and really committed to Jewish life and wonderful mentors along the way. And so for me, it's been just my own spiritual growth and my own leadership growth to then go into seminary and then become an assistant rabbi, an associate rabbi, and grow in my leadership to finally then pursue the congregation's position of senior rabbi was a different step. So for my generation, there are many women who are serving as rabbis. There are not yet many women who are serving in senior leadership positions. I would suggest this mirrors a lot of what we see in our society. I do think that there are still limitations in people's expectations around gender, in people's bias around gender out in the world, and therefore within our own synagogue walls as well.
Reverend Naomi Washington-Leapheart, how did you find your calling?
I was raised in religious community. Religious life was central to my own life. I went to a religious school, a Christian school, until high school, and just saw myself as kind of a super church member. Was heavily involved in all of the ways I could be. Was brought up. I'm my grandmother's namesake, so was living in her shadow as a woman who was a pioneer in her own right in the religious community and beyond. And so my whole social world was church, and I thought that was okay. I thought I'm fulfilling my obligation to a kind of religious duty that I inherited from my family and my church community. And then it was funny how it happened. People started to mistake me for a minister, which
Mm.
is kind of odd. So people, my nickname in college was Reverend. So, so it's true that perhaps people saw something in me, and people were beckoning me to a certain kind of role before I even accepted that for myself. I was a teacher before I became a minister, and I'm still a teacher, but now kind of a teaching minister. I was an organizer before I said yes to ministry, and now I'm kind of an organizing, justice seeking minister. So. It didn't make any sense to me at the time, but it makes a whole lot of sense to me now.
Reverend, as Rabbi indicated before, there are not a lot of women in leadership positions in her faith and certainly in faith communities. And as we embark on this new day in which we have a woman who is now Vice President of the United States of America, the glass ceiling was shattered. I wonder if you can relate to that extraordinary landmark and milestone with your own journey as a woman in this faith based space.
It's absolutely true that I think I was grown before I saw a woman minister, um, and certainly grown before I was connected to a woman pastor, Christian pastor, someone who was um, leading and guiding a faith community. Um, I think that there are particular experiences relevant to my life as a woman that informed certainly my faith leadership. Um, and I think that that's the beauty, right, of breaking those ceilings, of shattering those expectations. That we have a particular lens through which we can see life, see joys, see sorrows, see injustice, see healing and wholeness and possibility. And so I think that it would behoove us to make space for the different lenses in leadership, not just politically, but certainly in our religious communities. I love what Vice President Harris has been saying, that her commitment is to be the first, but not the last, right? So
Mm.
that we have an obligation once we are able to sit at tables that we've been excluded from before, to make room for people to come behind us, to not kind of wallow in or get comfy in, take a nap in these roles, such that we make it impossible for folks to follow us. Um, so, in the same way, I think I meet other women religious leaders who might be the first, but don't kind of rest on those laurels, want to make sure that they aren't the last. That's certainly my commitment as well.
Her presence really opens up possibility for all girls coming up, as do your examples. Rabbi, what about you? What are your thoughts as we have now inaugurated a woman vice president? And how does this relate to your leadership and your journey as a woman in faith based spaces?
I think that there's enough gender bias that there is still a barrier for many people of all genders to see women as leaders. I think that there's an unconscious bias that goes on where we're not necessarily seen as full adults with full agency, even down to the, as an example, down to the comments I get. I probably get more comments than my male colleagues about my looks, right? I could preach my heart out, and then I'll get as many comments about the outfit or the hair or whatever it might be. I doubt my male colleagues are hearing that. It's still how I think many of us relate to women. It may be intended as a compliment, but to hear a comment about your looks after you've done your work can be devaluing. My work isn't to be a fashion model. My work is to come and teach and inspire and move the congregation. And so I think that that's just one example as to the work that's left. to see anyone, you can't be it till you see it, right? To see anyone like Kamala Harris in that position is inspiring. And it moves all of us. It moves our assumptions as to where we see women and what a leader can look like. And I'm excited not only for my daughter to continue to see that, but for my son to continue to see that, for everyone to continue to be moved, and for that needle to move for all of us so that we can open up all of our opportunities in new ways.
Shared prosperity. The strength of American cities and our nation depends on generating inclusive growth for people of all races, ethnicities, and incomes. I wonder if we can talk about what your vision of shared prosperity is in the context of faith. Reverend?
There is a way in which prosperity in Christian tradition has been leveraged and exploited. The idea of prosperity to narrowly define the ways abundance and prosperity will manifest, right? So prosperity as in how many zeros behind the first number in my bank account, or prosperity in how much is my house worth, right? I want to expand, as you did in that definition, the notion of prosperity. Where's the abundance? Where are the ways in which I'm able to tap into the abundances of life? To eschew a kind of theology of scarcity, right? I'm in the rat race, I'm grinding because there's not enough to go around. But instead to say that all we need, we have in each other. This idea of shared prosperity is critical to our moving forward, to certainly acknowledge the ways in which abundance has been undermined and compromised by our political decisions, by our economic decisions, by our religious decisions, right? So there's a confession part, I think, to this, that we have not shared prosperity well. We have not um, leaned into abundance as we should. Uh, but there is possibility because we have all we need among us, right? And if we can just kind of distribute that abundance, that joy, that plenty, that enough, we can live fuller, richer lives.
Rabbi, what are your thoughts on shared prosperity?
I think I'm really moved by what you say, Reverend, and I'm thinking also of the role of minorities, and we are blessed in Philadelphia to have so many different groups, different backgrounds, and Judaism is among those minorities. I think that the role of the minority is to be able to see something with a special point of view, a special perspective, to understand the world not only through the authors, not only through the victors or the majority, but to understand what is the outsider's experience. And at the heart of democracy is protecting the minority. So every one of us who has that special perspective can bring that voice. I believe that's a special voice that is necessary when we think of social justice. I'm also thinking about our history, and there's so much. We're so lucky in Philadelphia to have these roots of history. And for me, one of the most powerful places in Philadelphia is on Independence Mall. If you look to one side, if you look to the west, you see Washington's slave quarters. And if you look to the east, you see on the National Museum of American Jewish History this banner with the same Washington's words, "To bigotry, no sanction." It's the same man. And to stand in between those two pieces of his history, to me, is such a powerful message about what it is today we need to be aware of in our history and what it is we need to move forward around. We can't make assumptions that this one man who maybe wanted to do good had such a complicated and problematic past, but to be able to lift both of those up in a place called Independence Mall, I think it gives us an opportunity in our own society, in our own city, to have eyes wide open to say we commit to not averting our eyes, to seeing the whole history, to seeing the whole truth. And perhaps that brings us a little closer to that moral imagination.
2026. It seems so far from now, and yet I'm sure it'll be here before we know it. I wonder if each of you could share a vision for 2026, a vision of shared prosperity and whatever it is that you see that we could achieve in less than 10 years, and also how you think we might get there. Reverend?
I harken back to the vision that is many, many years old. These beautiful words that all are made in divine image. What if we actually could codify that in our legal structure, in our political structure, in our social structure? That when I look at you, I'm looking at the divine image. Um, I'm looking at one whose life truly does matter, and not just matter in the body politic, but matters to me. Uh, there's a song in Christian tradition, gospel tradition, that says, "I need you to survive." Right, and I love the kind of double meaning within that. That I actually need you to survive in order for me to survive. Right, um, and that I care so much for you that I need you to survive. Um, right? That the world won't be the world. The world can't flourish if you aren't flourishing and surviving. I want us to have that kind of lofty goal that every political decision we make, every economic policy we support has as its foundation the uh, the inherent value and worth of all human beings. Uh, and so I want to see that reflected in our education policy, how we fund schools, how we educate our children. I want to see that reflected in our economic policies, particularly for those who are trying to get on the other side of poverty, for those who find themselves between gainful employment opportunities, right? I want to see that reflected in our um, taking seriously the leadership of people of all genders, of people from all kinds of walks of life. That core idea needs to be reflected in all aspects of our life.
Rabbi, what about you?
My mind very much exists in this pandemic reality. And so the idea of getting to 2026 and moving forward like that is a very hopeful one. And my head just isn't quite there. It's still so very stuck in this. And yet it's not only stuck. I think that I have so much to learn from this experience, from this crisis. And for me, I would never choose this experience. I don't think that this is how human beings are supposed to live, in isolation and physical isolation in this way. Although I'm clear that this is our responsibility, and every leader right now needs to serve as what in Hebrew we call a dugma, an example for the greater good, and for pekuach nefesh, the saving, the preserving of life. I don't believe this is how human beings should live and should have to live. But if we have to live in this way, I believe we have to learn from it. And I'm committed to finding the learnings out of this year and bringing them into the future. I think we have so much data. We have so much deeper understanding. There are many experiences that people are having this year that were clear already, but some of us didn't see clearly enough and are waking up a bit. And if we can remain awake, if we can remain aware of the needs of our community, the ways in which some of us moved much more comfortably through this crisis so far than others, the ways in which our society as a whole can show more care, I think we could come out a little bit stronger, a little bit more loving and caring, a little bit more in partnership. I wonder what it's like to imagine more partnership among churches, synagogues, faith-based organizations, mosques, but also neighborhoods. I don't know enough of my neighbors, and this makes me want to know them more. And so if that can be a part of my learning, then perhaps I can be part of a better future as well.
What a wonderful way to conclude our absolutely delightful conversation. I want to thank you both so much for this conversation. Rabbi Jill Maderer, Senior Rabbi of Rodef Shalom, and Reverend Naomi Washington-Leapheart, City of Philadelphia, Director of Faith-Based and Interfaith Affairs. This has been Lorraine Ballard Morrill for Philadelphia 250.
What young people are asking for is a reimagining of racial justice in this country, a reimagining of politics and who can participate and who can be at the table, a reimagining of how we treat our planet and not just taking from it, but also ensuring there's something to be left for future generations.